Welcome to the Darkstream, Voxday, voxday.net, and unauthorized.tv. So I've got a couple things to discuss, community stuff. But first, I'll just jump right into the topic at hand, which is who wants this war? And, I'd always wondered when you read stories about World War One and the histories of World War One, they talk about how the wars, like everybody knew that war was coming, expected it, anticipated it, even wanted to get involved in it. They'd had a long period of, a relatively long period of peace. The various countries were flexing their muscles and stuff. Now, it's obviously not akin to the current situation. Certainly, there are some populations that want war. Obviously, the Palestinians want war. Obviously, the Arab street, as they call it, wants war. The Israeli public definitely wants war. Most, but not all, of the Jewish diaspora resident in the United States is leaning towards war. Yes, Pigeon, it is bad if you kind of want it. You should not want war. Audio is a bit low, maybe. Same setting as it always is, so it's probably on your end. Gay Republican senators from South Carolina definitely want it. There's no question. But they want whatever they're paid. I don't think Lindsey Graham wants anything but strapping young men. He's just willing to do and say whatever he needs to keep the ball rolling, as it were. Anyhow, does Russia want war in the Middle East? I don't think so. But when you think about it, then maybe they kind of do. Iran probably does not want war in the Middle East, contra what people are all saying. I mean, why would they? All they need to do is wait. But China, I think China definitely wants war in the Middle East because, and that's where it starts to get interesting. That's why it's hard to say who started this war. We were discussing this on Social Galactic today. And of course, the most obvious candidate, Occam's razor, the most logical solution is that the Netanyahu administration wants and needs the war. Netanyahu's done. He's politically dead. And he's also facing corruption charges and criminal charges and who knows what else. And that was before the October 7th attacks. I mean, to me, it's kind of remarkable that whether there was a green flag or not, and all the evidence very, very strongly indicates that it was a green flag. It was I don't think, it wasn't a false flag. Certainly, Hamas attacked Israel. Certainly, Hamas claimed it. So there's not really any doubt about the fact that it was a genuine attack. But why was it so successful? Why were so many steps made to initially retard the response and then respond with, I think they call it the Hannibal option or something. Basically, just send in the helicopters and lay waste to everyone and everything that moved, including Israelis. It's even been suggested, I don't know how credibly, and honestly, this isn't something that I've been paying that much attention to because it's it's I just prefer whenever I see lots of competing um, propaganda and lots of competing narratives, I just ignore it because there's no point in trying to determine who's telling the truth because in most circumstances nobody is, and you can't just average it out and expect to reach a reasonable conclusion. But it has even been suggested that the majority of the casualties were actually caused by the IDF response. I don't know, you'd find that unlikely, but the attack on Gaza is obviously significantly exceeding any necessary response. Uh, Welcome, top fan. He is now the top fan. 2 acre ND Bear. Congratulations. Um, you know, I mean, when you have the cabinet ministers and um, members of the Knesset openly advocating ethnic cleansing, when you've got a reported 25,000 casualties, um, that's when a lot of people are quite rightly saying, hey, hang on, uh, this does not appear to be a reasonably proportionate response to an attack that you appear to have known about and been able to prevent. Maybe all of this was planned, permitted, anticipated. Um, and it's true, as Sam said, we shouldn't compare other genocides to this one. It would be wrong. Um, but that's when you start, that's when you start looking at where are there wheels within the wheels. I mean, it doesn't stop with Israel. Considering that it's believed that the Hamas plans for the October 7th attack were known to Israel a year ago or a year in advance of it, there is no chance that Iran and Russia, probably the United States, possibly China, all knew about it as well. And so just as Israel appears to have used the Hamas attacks to seek to achieve some of its strategic goals, it is quite likely that any other party that knew about it, that knew it was going to be coming, also began to incorporate that into their strategic plans. And what are we seeing? Well, we're seeing the strangling of the Red Sea. We're seeing the enmeshing of the United States in the Middle East. Now, obviously, we know that uh, Israel wants the U.S. to get involved in the Middle East, and it needs an ally against Iran and the Arab world. You know, Israel matches up pretty well still to the Arab world. It does not match up well to Iran. You know, and um, you know, don't forget, and this is something that people clearly forget when they look at Russia versus Ukraine. Iran took 1 million casualties, actually, I think it was 1 million fatalities in its war with Iraq. Didn't affect the stability of the regime at all. You know, and the people were, um, fully supportive of that war. They would be just as supportive of a war against Israel and just as willing to absorb that many casualties. And that's a war on a scale that Israel can't fight. That's why they need the U.S. there. Powers at Bear asks, curious what accounts for Iran's status compared to other Middle East countries. Well, they're Persians not Arabs. You know, they're large. They have their own oil, and their population is smart. You know, Persians are intelligent people. Um, the guy who was the vice president of engineering under my dad for uh, many years uh, is Persian, and he's from Iran. Smart guy, very smart guy. And so they're formidable in a way that the Egyptians are not. You know, um, a lot of countries have. I mean, the Persians, go back to fighting the Greeks and the Romans, and um, are they, were they technologically behind? Did they fall behind Western civilization? Yes, of course they did. But so what? They've learned how to adapt it, and that's why that's why the Israeli government has quite rightly been deeply concerned with them, and um, you know bombed their nuclear reactor back in what 1983. Um, that sort of thing isn't possible today, not with modern air defenses. And so you know so the U.S. needs or the Israel needs the U.S. to be involved in order to counterbalance Iran. But everybody knows that. The Chinese know that. The Russians know that. And so, to me, it's very, very suspicious. It's deeply suspicious that uh, this should take place. Remember, I'd been talking well over a year ago about the possibility that a Middle East front was going to be opened up. And I believe that it was in the interest of the Sino Russian alliance in particular and the BRICS organization in general for a front to open up in the Middle East. And lo and behold, look what happened. Now, there was a little while where I thought, well, maybe they're going for Africa. Maybe they're going to use Africa because of the way that some of the Francophone African countries were revolting against the remnants of French imperialism and kicking out the French companies and satrapies and soldiers. But that appears to have been something that was just genuinely organic, not something that was being arranged or supported by Sino-Russian machinations. And so, why would it happen now? Why would Russia be interested now? Well, Ukraine is falling apart. The moment that the Russians have been waiting for has come, and of course now what are we seeing? We're seeing NATO, UK, neoclowns in the USA, all pushing for NATO to get directly involved. For NATO to go to war against Russia. And Russia doesn't want that. Russia's whole method of handling the conflict in Ukraine has been done specifically in a way to prevent it from having to go directly against NATO, even though they were preparing to do it. And so, if you look at why this happened, well, if the U.S. military gets fully committed into into the Red Sea with either Iran, Hezbollah, whatever, then I think what we are likely going to see is Russia doing whatever it wants to do in Ukraine, and China arranging for the reunification of Taiwan Island with the mainland. However, it's quite possible that the US military is actually already too weak to get involved directly because, um, as Trash Panda observes, Western powers are going to struggle getting willing Western fighters. People seem pretty insistent on not participating. Well, exactly. I think that at this point, even if the situation on the border between Texas and the federal government actually turned into something violent, the majority of U.S. citizens would support Texas, not the federal government. And so we're living in a very precarious and very fascinating time where just about any of these powder kegs could kick off without warning at any moment. You and that's why I think it's foolish to try to predict anything. It's most important to just kind of observe what's happening, do our best to make sense of it, and then make decisions accordingly. And um, but the main thing is obviously stay out of the hot zones. This is not a good time to go on that vacation to Dubai or Morocco. It's probably not a great time to go down to San Antonio or New York. Um, Sam points out, I guess if Russia arms Texas, it can't be considered a party to the conflict by the new rules. Yeah, well, as we all know, the rules-based order will probably interpret that differently than it interpreted the rules about supplying Ukraine. Powers at Bear said, hard to believe this many fronts are even physically possible. Well, they're not physically possible for any one military to fight on all of them. But that's the problem for the U.S. empire. When you play the game of empire, you have to defend on all fronts. Even the Romans reach their limits finally. Um, we are, I believe, seeing the. I believe we've already seen the full extent and the limits of the U.S. empire. You know, it's interesting because we, I mean, we had been talking about this on the blog for years, right? And we'd all talked about what is the U.S. equivalent of the Athenian expedition to Sicily. That was the moment of imperial overreach that doomed the Athenian Empire. Um, and it's to me, it's just fascinating that imperialists, whether it's Hitler, whether it's Napoleon, whether it's um, uh, Alexander the Great, they never learn. You know, they never learn that you can't you can't just organically continue to conquer the world. And it's interesting how if you play war games, you intrinsically understand that even if you play something as simple as Risk, you quickly learn that the more you take, the more everybody turns against you. And that's what's happened. You know, the US is going to have to pay for decades of misbehavior. I don't mean pay in the sense of um, necessarily violence or vengeance or anything. I mean, they're going to lose allies and neutrals who are going to sign up with BRICS just to free themselves from the dollar, just to free themselves from the IMF. So it's really a fascinating time. I mean, you know, I'm. It's something that I hope that I live long enough to see how it all plays out on the other side, it would be really fun to, uh, you know, write a history of it, I think. Um, it's too soon to do so now. And we have too occluded a vision of what's actually taking place. But, the rise and fall of the Clown World Empire is, I think, going to be a fascinating book for future generations. Um, Anyhow, that's all I've got to say about that. We'll continue to pay attention to events. I'm nearly ready. I'd say within 2 weeks, I'll be ready to present my analysis of the Taiwanese war game. And so I think that that's going to be fascinating. I'll make sure to give everybody a couple days warning so that if you want to watch it live, you'll be able to. And also prepare any questions that you might have, so we can discuss it afterwards. So, so that's it for that portion of the stream. Now let's talk a little bit about Castalia Library. Um, those of you who are unauthorized, you've probably noticed that we have a new channel that I announced. Did any of you happen to watch it? Check any of it out? We actually have our first sports channel. It's not going to be the last one, I can tell you that right now. But we have our first sports channel, and Castalia Library is going to be um, sponsoring the Dorking Wanderers team. And it's kind of interesting. We have a little bit of a, it's not a problem, it's just an issue to resolve. So this is the logo that we were planning to put on the back of the shirts. And we thought we'd keep it really simple. We thought we'd keep it really basic, and we thought it would look good, and it did look really good on the mock-ups for 2 of the 3 jerseys. The home jersey looked good. The third jersey looked good. Unfortunately, the the away jersey wasn't great. Um, so what we did is, I really like the Castalia History logo, which you guys are going to. Those books are getting bound very soon. So um, anyhow, but the problem is that it had our ergo, or no, Lego Ergo Shio motto, which is kind of confusing and a little bit strange. Um, Inquisitor Bear says, in my opinion, clothing with writing on it goes against the whole high class vibe of Castalia. Um, Maybe, but you know, it, to be in the football team sponsorship thing is pretty important. More importantly, um, nobody in England knows that we exist. So we need to do something if we're going to introduce our books to that market. And this just happened to be an opportunity that presented itself because we are going to do books for them. So anyhow, what we did was we modified the Castalia History logo. We're not planning on using this one in general. This was just something, we have a time limit on getting something together. And um, so what we did is we took our history spine logo and just put Castalia Library in the words. And we do plan to do a Castalia Library specific logo of this type. This, by the way, is actually the simple logo. We actually have a more ornate and complicated version of it that we'll be using as the colophon in the history books in the near future. But so anyhow, this should work. This should work better. So, and here I can show you. This is just crude. These are just crude mock-ups. but they give you a pretty good idea of what it'll look like. So this is what the home jersey would look like. Um, and it'll probably be a little, I mean, like I said, this is just really whipped together. So the lines, I think, would probably be a bit thicker. Um, but anyhow, I think that's really going to uh, stand out compared to your average back of the shirt logo that they have. Um, and here you'll see why it was necessary uh, to come up with a different solution, or why I think it was necessary. We could still use the other one if for some reason this one didn't work, but um, for the on the away jersey, you see how the front is the blue and black stripes, kind of like Inter Internazionale, the Milano team, and the evil, bad Milano team that we don't support, by the way. Um, but the problem was that the horizontal logo running across the vertical stripes, it kind of clashed a bit. So anyhow, that's why we tried this more vertical oriented logo. Their their uniform designer actually preferred it, and so I think this is a good solution. I mean, Castalia history is part of Castalia Library anyhow, right? So um, so I think it's going to be it'll be interesting to see what they make of it. Hopefully they'll think it's cool. But if for whatever reason it's too much or uh, too overpowering or whatever, we can always just use the simple one. So anyhow, I just thought that those of you who are Castalia subscribers and Castalia House readers, um, the it says second one looks fine as is. First one could use a bolder line around diamond. They're actually exactly the same. It's just that it stands out more against the one. So, you know, but like I said, that's just a, you know, something thrown together very quickly to give you an idea of what it looks like and so forth. So, um, no, we're not going to simplify it further. We like the complicated stuff. Um, we're not trying we're not trying to sell T-shirts. You know what I mean? And if people think that it's a bit fancy, well, that should be uh, the whole point is just to get attention to um, and so uh, I think that I think it will be an effective way to do it. Um, have an example of a different sponsor. Um, sure. Let me see here. Let's see. So, let me see if they have a sponsor on this. This is okay. Well, this is an Italian jersey. They just have the team name on the back like that. They don't really have. I mean, they're very cool jerseys. I don't know if you can see the patterns, but the whole thing has these like Baroque Italian patterns in them. It's really cool. Has nothing to do with the team that we're sponsoring. Here's an example of what like a previous sponsor has. So that's why we thought that horizontal thing would work. But with the stripes on the bottom, the vertical thing doesn't work quite as well. So um, so it's obviously we'll tweak whatever we need to do to make sure it looks good and that sort of thing. But yeah, we're going to need the thicker lines. And in fact, if you look, the lines are actually thicker than um, the lines are a lot thicker than they looked on that shirt, just because of the way it inverted and so forth. So, um, but we'll see. Again, they may say, hey, look, we wanted that's too ornate. Can you make it simpler, whatever? We've never done any of this stuff before. So we're learning about the process. We're learning about what sort of things are possible. So that should be interesting. Now here's the next question. How many of you have checked out the Sigma Game Substack? How many of you find it interesting and useful to have the dedicated stuff on a specific site? Cactus Eater Bear says, "When can I buy a sponsored jersey?" You can probably buy them now, but um, we'll need to. We'll need. We're arranging so that you're going to be able to buy it and get the stuff shipped from the same place our books come from in New York. So, um, because right now it would just the shipping would be ridiculous. So we'll get there. We'll get there soon. Um, Blitzkrieg Bear says yes to Substack. Sigma blog. He likes the Substack. Well, here's what I'm thinking about doing. Um, one of the big problems that we have, obviously, is getting the relevant emails to the Castalia Library subscribers and to the people who are uh, just just interested in the leather books on a occasional basis. What do you guys think about the idea of us launching a Castalia Library Substack, kind of similar to what we're doing on Library Thing, but where uh, you could subscribe to it, it wouldn't cost anything, and the information gets out much more efficiently and effectively. We would still maintain our regular email lists, um, but you know, just too many people are missing too much information, and I think that it would be useful. It'd be potentially useful for people who don't know as much about Castalia Library to have a place to go to, because Library Thing doesn't work in that. I mean, it works, but to a limited extent. You know, we're going to don't get me wrong, we're going to maintain it, we're going to continue it, but what Substack really is, and I don't think most people quite recognize this, is that um, Substack is basically a email platform. It's basically a email system, a mass email system with a blog platform on top of it. You know, I mean that's how Substack is so effective, because it basically gets people to actually sign up for email lists and get the emails repetitively. Um, yeah. So so, I mean, the reason that got me thinking about this is I don't know if you noticed on the blog today, but Sigma Game has been around for 14 days, and it already has 104,000 views. You know, that's astonishing to me, because it's not like I don't get plenty of views at the blog. I get more views than that on the blog, right? I mean, in the last 14 days, I've probably had like 300,000 views or 350,000 views. Um, but the fact that um, people can access it without going through the blog, and also the fact that it'll be just devoted only to Castalia Library. You know, um, Castalia Substack would be beneficial. Who would run it? Well, initially me. Hopefully, eventually, other people would. But the nice thing about Substack is that it's quite easy to give other people access. And so, um, I mean, I'm not talking about you know putting up a blog post every weekday like I do with Sigma Game. Um, I don't have the time for that. And this, you have to keep in mind that the Sigma game thing. I know some people get concerned about how, oh, are you going to start doing that instead of the blog, blah blah blah. No, the Sigma game stuff right now is very easy for me to post because I'm actively working on the book. Yesterday I wrote like 3,200 words on the book. The blog post kind of came out of the what I was working on the book yesterday, not today. Although after the discussions about it, I started thinking, you know, um, but anyhow, the main thing is it's a good way of every time we've got to a small announcement, we can get the news out to everybody quickly and in a efficient manner. You know, and so it's a new way for it. It'd also be just another way of allowing people to come into the Castalia Library world, especially in advance of this whole football thing, because um, because with football, you're likely to see um, a lot more interest over time, and we don't necessarily want people coming to my blog. I mean, can you imagine? You're a football player, or you're into football. You kind of like books, and suddenly there's discussions of geostrategics and trade war and social sexual hierarchy. I mean, nobody wants to deal with that. Um, Powers of Bear said, I've never used Substack, but would sign up if that's the direction. Well, it's not the direction per se. It's just an additional conversation route. Um, Sam says, there's a good amount of soccer content on the blog. Believe me, nobody who follows professional football in Europe has any interest in some, tail end of middle-aged guy writing about his veteran football team, you know? And so, um, I mean, it's kind of amusing to think about, but yeah, I don't see that happening. So, anyhow, well, thanks for the input. It sounds like nobody's got a problem with it, and um, and it sounds like it's a potentially good idea. So, I will get it up. I will get it started, and hey, we've we've even got a funky logo for it. And we are, just to be clear, we are working on a proper Castalia Library site. I mean, we've got castalialibrary.com, um, but that's a much more serious, much more labor-intensive um, effort, required to get all the store stuff and all that sort of thing. And just because of the positive experience with the Sigma Game Substack, I thought, you know what, maybe we should just go ahead and make use of that because, um, let's face it, um, it's not something that we use the Archaven blog for, and it's not something that we use the Castalia House blog for. So, in any event, have a good evening. Um, Thanks for tuning in, and we will talk to you soon on Vox Day. And this is the Darkstream.